All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to start Unit 6. And so Unit 6 deals with the concepts of monetary policy. And monetary policy, you'll notice in the name, has money in it. So we need to start talking about money and understanding what money is, right? And then we'll start talking about the important role of banks. We'll start talking about what the Federal Reserve can do to manipulate the economy. So let's start talking about money, and let's give a definition. So money is anything that is generally accepted as a medium of exchange. That makes pretty much good sense. Three functions. Acts as a medium of exchange. It's what allows us to conduct transactions, pay our debts. It is our standard of value. It allows us to measure and compare things using one scale, right? So if I said that Meatball the cat was worth $50, you would know, oh, he's a relatively cheap cat. But if I said Meatball the cat was worth $2.5 billion, you would know, holy crap, that's the most expensive cat on the earth, right? So it gives us a way of understanding how much something is worth, at least in our society. Right. It also acts as a store of value. So typically it holds its value over time. Now, obviously, with things like inflation, that can create a problem, right? So the dollar today is not worth as much as it was, 6 years ago, but generally it still holds some value over time. Now, a couple things. Money has to be a couple things. It has to be acceptable, meaning people want it, right? If you walked into Giant and tried to buy your groceries with a bag full of loose baby teeth, the store owner would turn you away and you would not get your food. But if you walked in with $200, you get your food. Number two, it needs to be scarce, right? For anything to have value, as we know, it needs to be a certain level of scarce. So money is a scarce thing, hence why the phrase "if money grew on trees" is the most annoying, incorrect phrase in human history, because if money grew on trees, it would no longer be money. We'd find something else to make our currency, like black and white cats. I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm running out of inspiration and all I see is the cat. It needs to be portable. So money needs to be able to be, if you're going to use it to buy something, you need to be able to transport it. So hence why gold bars, as they were originally intended, aren't very good sources of money, because you buy something, let's say you bought a car, you'd have to wheel in, the equivalent amount of gold. That's very heavy and very hard to do. It needs to be durable, right? So back in the old days, you used to have things like meat. Meat used to be considered a currency, but that was a problem because after a while, meat spoils and then your value is gone. It needs to be divisible, so you need to be able to take $100, turn it into four payments of 25, or have some change, all those types of things, so you can have smaller amounts. And it needs to be uniform. So money needs to be money, right? So if I took $1 out of your wallet and exchanged it with $1 from my wallet, you have lost no value. Whereas if you use, let's say, diamonds are not all worth the same. Some have certain imperfections or certain are higher qualities that make them more or less valuable. So they can't be used as a currency. They have value, but they're not a currency. Right? A dollar is a dollar. A penny is a penny. Now maybe you got like an Indian head penny or some weird dollar that makes it more valuable, but in the general sense, they all need to be uniform. So throughout history, things like salt, shells, cattle, beads, furs, those were all used as currencies. But those were considered commodity monies because they had some sort of intrinsic value, right? You could cure meat with salt, you could eat the cattle, you could make something out of the beads, you could make a sweater out of the fur, you could smoke the tobacco, all of that stuff. But what we have today is something called a fiat money, meaning our money is worth something because the government says it is, right? If you notice on your currency, it'll say something like backed with the full faith and credit of the United States government, meaning our currency has value because the government deems it has value, right? So notice the word fiat, fiat meaning decree. Right, so the government is decreeing our money to have value, and we as a society all generally agree to believe in that. Now, let's get this out of the esoteric and put it more into the econ. So when we talk about money in our economy, we talk about two different types of money, right? So we have the M1 money supply. And so the M1 money supply is made up of all the stuff that is in your purses, in your wallets, and in your piggy banks, right? So your coins and bills, anything that is circulating out in the economy. So every dollar in every cash register in the United States, every penny and every couch cushion in the United States is considered in the M1 money supply. This is in it, but it's also the money that you have registered in your checking accounts, right? So if you have a debit card and you have a checking account, that money is in our economic understanding the same as having 20 bucks in your pocket, right? Because if you go to the bank and you withdraw it, it's yours. It's there. You don't have to like wait for it. There's no fees. It is liquid, right? So let's give that word here. So when we talk about liquidity, right, we're talking about money that is easily fungible and easily transferable, right? So cash and having money in a checking account is the highest form of liquidity, right? You could be you could have a lot of assets, right? You ever heard the phrase I'm house poor, right? When a lot of people, when you buy a house, you dump a lot of money into buying a house, and you have, let's say, a house that's worth $250,000, $300,000, and so your wealth is equal to the value of the house, but your available cash is very limited because the value of your house is tied up in the fact that you would need to sell it to get back any of that money. So you're not really liquid, right? So M1, coins and bills, checkable deposits, checking accounts, and traveler's checks. M2 gets a little complicated. So it adds in all of what is in M1 plus, so you'll see over here, plus less liquid assets, savings accounts, money markets, and certified deposits. So these things are less liquid because they are not necessarily intended to be used day to day, right? A savings account or a CD, they have like maturity dates, right? So if you have a CD, you get a CD for 5-10 years, you can take the money out, but you pay a fee or something like that. The intended of it, these are financial investments, right? The intended purpose of a CD is that in 5 to 10 years, you would then reap the benefit of that investment, not today. Whereas the money up here is intended for transactions like food, groceries, gas, trips, things you're going to do today. Right, so M1 is more liquid than M2, right, because this money is flowing like a river. This money in M2 is much more frozen. I like to think of it as frozen, like the money's frozen there and it has to sit in that block of ice for 5 years before it can be any value to the economy today. All right. So you should have probably seen this graph so far. But when we start to talk about money, that requires us to talk about the money market. So we have our money market graph. And so on the y-axis, we have our nominal interest rate. And on the x-axis, we have our quantity. All right, our money demand and our money supply. Now, our money demand is downward sloping because this is where you demand money. You consumers, businesses, and governments are all individuals and groups and institutions that are demanders of money. But you'll notice that the money supply curve is up and down. It is vertical, right? Because unlike supply of shoes, hats, or cats, this is not the available quantity or the quantity supplied of money is not predicated on the price of the money, because the money supply is, for most part, dictated by the Federal Reserve. And so the Federal Reserve, which we'll talk about in later lessons, dictates the size of the money supply and is the only thing that can move this guy to the right and increase, or move this guy to the left, a decrease. Right? And notice what happens when the Federal Reserve does that, right? So if the Federal Reserve, like it has been doing over the last couple of weeks, has been flooding the market with cash, look what's happening to the interest rate. Right? The nominal interest rate drops. Right? And the quantity goes up. So as a kind of thinking about this as we move further, how can we use the money supply as a tool to fix this? Right? How can we use movement of the money supply to fix a recessionary gap? Right? And that's going to be what monetary policy is all about. Okay? And so we'll cover that in a little bit, but that is your lesson on money, moolah, cheddar, Benjamins, bills, whatever lettuce, whatever slang term for money that you want to use in these trying times. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm definitely not going insane. What is going on?